This event was set up to be a peaceful gathering for women to speak about the concerns of women. From the perspective of 3 of the volunteer marshals who were at the rotunda, this is their account. Auckland, Albert Park, 25th of March, 2023.
The marshals are in the perimeters, between the perimeters of the fencing. None of that was meant to be secure, of course. It was meant to be a boundary that reasonable people should have been able to abide by.
I tried to watch the video that you sent, but hearing the crowd and actually seeing it was just too terrifying for me to watch it. I mean, I know on an intellectual level that, we got out, and I got out without having more than a couple of thumps on the back, but it was a terrifying situation to be in.
Anyone or anything tell me what I'm not, which is being a human. And we all are like worthy of love. And love has no gender. That's what this is all about.
In the last week before the Posie Parker event, a friend in Auckland rang me and asked me if I'd be a marshal. I had thought about offering, but I thought at 69 years old that I was too old really to offer. But they didn't have many marshals, so I said I would give it a go. I had already decided to make the 4-hour journey to Auckland because I figured that if Posie Parker could come all the way here to try and help this cause, I thought, well, the least I could do is drive the 4 hours to Auckland. So we turned up on the day. By the time we got up to the rotund, there was a huge crowd already, and they were behind 2 flimsy barriers.
Well, initially when I got there, the crowd already had amassed to maybe a couple of hundred people. And at that point, I just thought, oh, okay, this is a bit more than a handful of protesters that I thought would be there. And the noise was so loud. And I just thought, let's find out what's going on and approach one of the 3 wardens there at the time, because that's what I was there to do, was to help out on that day.
What had happened for me the week before when I'd said I would be a marshal, I'd looked at the videos from her engagements in Australia, and I'd seen the police being held back behind a line of police. And online I'd seen a semantic of the Albert Park proposal for the police where they were going to hold a line and keep the protesters back up towards the statue of Queen Vic. So when we got up there and I saw the 2 flimsy barriers, it was like, well, this is not what I'd seen on the videos.
All I could think was, where are the police? Where's anybody? This one security guard and maybe a couple of other ones that were sort of scattered on the other side across from where I was. And I really started to get nervous at that point, a lot more nervous than before. I was then thought to myself, this is getting out of hand. When the crowd started to get larger, I was facing away from the front of the rotunda, and by the time I had turned around, I could just see these sort of swarms of people come to my right and to my left. It's just everywhere. Some massive groups of people coming up the hills, the slopes and the paths, and just from all directions en masse. And all I could think to myself was, are they coming towards us? Oh crap. I think we're in shit. At that stage, things had escalated, and meaning like there were a lot more sort of aggressive fights or arguments and loud protests happening within amongst the different protesters that assembled. And the entrance that was guarded by one security officer was then starting to get a bit more of the protesters trying to get through.
So then after about 5 minutes of that, or 10 minutes, they broke through the first barrier, and I moved to the front, to the steps of the rotund, which I'd seen on the video, that you go forward and you try to protect Posie, and you put your arms out and stand with your back to the crowd, which I did.
And the fences are down.
And at that point, I was looking around, trying to see across the seas of people with swarms, just so many people, all direction, 360 surrounding the rotunda.
And there was a man up on the steps and he kept telling me to go up, and I kept thinking, well, this is all that I can do. I can't do anything else to help, try to stop people getting up. But eventually I went up the steps and he made room for me to go up onto the platform of the rotund.
You know, even waving the placards, even waving the flags, it's done aggressively.
And I was so scared. I was beside myself with fear. And then the big wire frame, a heavy wire frame that was behind Posie, that we'd been using to put posters on, started rocking. And I realised that protest activist people had got behind the screen and they were trying to push it down on top of Posie. So I stood with my back to the screen and braced it to stop them being able to push it over. And then somebody else had, I think one of the security guards said to me that they were going to try and get Posie out, that they had to get her out.
The sound was just huge. It was immense. When I tried to ring the police operator was extremely obstructive. It just kept saying she couldn't hear me and that I needed to turn the background noise down. That wasn't very helpful. I kept screaming, "We need help. We're being attacked. We need help. We're at Albert Park." She said, "Can't hear you. Where are you?"
And all I could think to myself was, oh, we're going to get stormed. And then, because that had happened, it was, okay, well, get to the middle, inside the rotunda, and get as many people and other wardens into that area.
When the trans flags were surrounding us on the rotunda, we realised that this wasn't getting any better. In fact, it was getting worse. When Kellie-Jay was arriving and getting up onto the steps of the rotunda, even after the tomato juice, I was waiting for things to die down so we could actually start. But, of course, that was a bit hopeful, and it didn't take long to realise that we were screwed.
Before I went up onto the rotund, I tried to ring the police. It was all I could think to do. I knew that they were standing off to the side. I'd seen them when we arrived. And I thought maybe they don't realise how bad this is, that it's really serious. And I tried to ring them, and of course there was no way to get through. And that's when I went up onto the rotund.
Amongst it, from a distance, I could see this police officer on the outskirts of the path just watching, like just there. And I was waving up to him. And I just knew then that sort of, I don't know, sinking feeling, and the realisation that that police officer was not going to help us. Actually, nobody was going to help us. Attempts had to be made from up the back side of the rotunda to try and jump in there and to kind of push things over and, I guess, to go for Kellie-Jay.
And I can't watch it. I don't know that that's ever going to be possible. It was too terrifying to watch it.
Because at that point I felt like my life was in danger, and I don't know the intentions of everybody there, but the ones that were close by were aggressive. And I knew we just had to get out of there. And all I knew is that we had to surround her. And then in my thinking, it was just to save her life, actually. I wasn't really thinking about anything else. These people were everywhere. They'd already aggressively at the front, the 360, all surrounded. There was no choice. And in that moment, I grabbed her, told her. And I was talking to Tanya at the time, and I said to her, look, this is getting dangerous. We need to go now.
There was no police. At no time did I see. And then this liquid hit my head and the back of my neck. And my immediate thought was, oh my God, I hope that's not acid or some really toxic chemical. And then I realised it was water.
I didn't know that there were police officers that walked through the crowd. I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of crowd. Even just before we'd left the rotunda, they were nowhere near us. They hadn't followed even closer to where we were.
There was a huge crowd around the rotund baying like wild, feral murderers, actually. Yes, what it felt like. It felt like they were conquering murderers.
And then we made our way of just forming this circle, just holding on to each other and just pushing through ahead like a scrum. Yeah, to be honest, even the 30 seconds of watching this clip has just been quite emotional.
And the group around Posie, we started moving down the hill. What I knew wasn't where we were supposed to be going, because we were supposed to go out onto the road and hopefully there'd be a car there. I wasn't really aware of the people around me except the security guard off to my left and somebody in front of him, because it was such an intense situation. And it was so dangerous. It felt to me like it was really touch and go as to whether we'd get her out alive and whether we'd all get out alive, actually. It was so intense, so intensely hostile, so intensely hateful, and so intensely dangerous. There's a drain, a smallish drain around the outside of the rock below the rotund, and Posie had her feet caught in it, and that's why she felt like she was going to go down, because she couldn't get her feet under her to be able to stand up properly.
It was so crowded, there was no room for our feet to go. There was a time where I nearly fell, and then the crowd sort of held me up a little bit, even though I didn't have any footing.
Just swarms of people just grabbing and pulling at me and at us, trying to trip us too. Yeah, and lots of expletives and just, I don't know, I just kind of felt a lot of hate and a lot of guts to get us.
Went downhill. We then, all of us that were helping to get her out, we all pushed sideways to go out onto the road by the university to get out. We got out to the edges of the crowd.
And they eventually took me down and punched and kicked while I was down. And prior to that, I'd been put in a headlock and had my throat scratched and my neck scratched. Yeah, scratching the hair on my neck.
And just as that crowd thinned out, the police, who'd been standing there just watching us, came forward and surrounded her as though they were doing a good thing. You know, mind you, I suppose they were, because when they'd taken Posie, I went out onto the street to try and see what had happened to her, and I took off my vest straight away.
I just thought, this is not the New Zealand that I know and love. What is this about?
This is not the New Zealand I know and love. What is this about? Will the New Zealand government, police and media once again allow and support mob rule to suppress free speech for the rights of women and the protection of children? This video is dedicated to the marshals who put themselves on the line to protect Kellie-Jay Keen at Albert Park that day.